Oh my goodness, another Wednesday afternoon here on Wayward Media's primetime YouTube channel. This is the Because Cannabis podcast, brand new episodes every single Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube, every Thursday on Spotify with video. By the way, give it a follow on Spotify. We need to get them Spotify numbers up, Dustin Kava. That's what we need to do right now. Implore the people. My name's BC Wayman. That's Dustin Kava. Dustin, our Spotify numbers, our YouTube numbers are growing. Spotify numbers standing stagnant. How do we get them numbers up, Dustin?
I don't know, man. Can you guys get those numbers up for us?
You. This is like a Dora's episode. You right there. You can do it. Take that finger and hit subscribe. We did it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thank you for checking us out. We are in the middle, Dustin, of an educational series. We are coming up soon. We'll get some interviews back here in just a little bit. Dustin and I thought to kick off 2024, it would be great as we move forward. We're in a state, Ohio, that just legalized cannabis in the 24th state. As we move forward in this industry, it can be time to remind ourselves that not everyone knows what you know, or what I know, or what they know. A lot of times, Dustin, in this world, cannabis can be a little intimidating because people start tossing off words and phrases and acronyms. It's like the military, and they're supposed to know you. They expect you, the customer, to know what all these things mean. We want to educate. That's the number one word in this industry. Let's educate people. Let's make them smarter. Yet we just throw out all these words like a dump of information. Here is all the facts. Now, do you know? It's so much, man. So I'm really glad that we spent these last couple of weeks. If you haven't checked out our past episodes, cannabis concentrates, really deep dive into the various types of consistency of concentrates. Cannabis tourism. Can you travel with weed? It's hard. But if you want to know the ins and outs of that, check that episode out as well. And then today's episode, Dustin, do you get frustrated by the information? Would you get frustrated on people's expectations to know all of this stuff? Do you know how much alpha and beta pinene is in your weed? Go. Come on.
Yeah, you know what I do, and I think there's a part of me that's just like, oh, those are the guys who really took their hobby to a next level. You know, like it's like the crocheter that's doing like, you know, some crazy technique, or like I don't know. There's always going to be that person who goes in depth. And I think that, like, I remember owning the shop and getting really, really involved in something I was saying to a customer. And the customer looked at me. He's like, dude, I've been smoking for 25 years. You think I give a fuck about any of this? Like, you're not, like, it doesn't matter how much you present me with information today. I still know how to smoke because I've been smoking for 25 years. All else is irrelevant.
It's really interesting to think about, because when you get into the cannabis industry, when you work for these companies, that's what they want to do. Yeah. They want to just talk about all their science, and it's wonderful. They want to talk about all the techniques that they use, and it's wonderful. They want to break down the terpene profile to 0.002%, letting you know how much humulene is inside this product. But it becomes, like most folks, from the newbies to the grizzled veterans of weed, they just want to consume. For therapeutic, to get high, they just want to consume. I think about that a lot, Dustin, when it comes to, I'm in that same world sometimes. Like, I play a lot of disc golf. We talk about that. There is a ton of new technology. There's all these terminologies people use. I go out and play with you. I got my bag. I got my carts. I got my thing. And you're like, bro, I got a couple Frisbees that I chuck, and I hope they come back to me. That's it, right? I hope I don't put them in the water. And so you have both. But for some reason, the gatekeeping in cannabis seems very high, pun intended, if you don't keep up with the acronym Joneses, if you don't know all the different profiles of this stuff. It seems to me you get a bit cannabis shamed if you don't know it all.
Yeah, dude, exactly. I feel that. I feel that on a heavy level, especially because everybody that we talk to, they got something to prove. And so they all are spitting out this stuff like it literally is their job, because it's their job. But I mean, it is. I feel like sometimes I wish we could just get down to the simpler things. This is, you know.
Some people just want to smoke weed. That's all they want to do. They don't want to learn. They don't want to be educated. The cannabis is a relaxation escape from their life. The cannabis provides therapeutic effect for whatever ailments they are feeling. And the goal is for the cannabis to relieve them. And so if you are suffering from what a lot of people consume cannabis for, anxiety, stress, to unwind in an adult use world, and yet we're like, hey, I know you want to unwind, bro. I know you just want to light that joint and relax, but let's talk about the full profile of what's inside of it. And then let's talk about the medicinal benefits that could be happening into your body. And then let's talk about the endocannabinoid system. If I talk to you about your CB receptor, bro, I just want to get high, right? It becomes a weird thing. So we're trying to help you guys out here on the Because Cannabis Show for the next few weeks, doing these educational series. And so, Dustin, because of that, because of all this stuff, I thought it would be fun to kind of put together this little slideshow. Basically, let's walk through the, what do we call it? Like the cannabis alphabet. I like to call it the cannabis alphabet, but I don't think that's right. It's like the cannabis acronym jungle, alphabet soup. What should we call this kind of vibe here?
It's definitely not going to be the industry term, but to me it is. It's the alphabet soup. It's like there's over 100 identified cannabinoids, in the plant so far, with more being discovered all the time. And it's like, what else do you call something where there's 100 different 3-letter at least acronyms for?
At least, and more coming every day, and then having to understand the different aspects of it. And then we're not even going to talk about it on this episode. Be sure to subscribe for a future episode. Terpenes, flavonoids, like all these other things we got to worry about, or just go to the store, buy a little weed, smoke it if you got it. But if you're looking to learn, you came to the right place today on this episode of Because Cannabis. Give us a subscription, give us a notification so you can know when the next episode is going to come out, when you are going to get educated. Maybe you're smoking while you're doing this. Who knows what you're doing right now? All right, Dustin, let's break down the alphabet soup of cannabis. Let's talk about the big boys for today. We're calling it the cannabinoid crew. We're going to go through a quick comparison. We're talking the high-level cannabinoids today: THC, CBD, CBG, CBN. I think we should definitely talk Delta-8. It's not usually considered in that realm because it's the other legal cannabinoid, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So let's talk through this a little bit. Dustin, why do you think we use acronyms? Like, why not just call it the full name? Do you think acronyms is the better way for people to understand it?
It depends on what level of understanding you want. If you're teaching like a fourth grader about it, yeah, these acronyms make the most sense. If you're talking to a well-to-do, I don't know, professor or something, it's like, no, if you actually said what it is, it probably will make more sense to them. Like they understand why it's being broken down that way based on the name of it. And so I don't know. But I think, what else are we going to do? These words are hard enough to say in general than to have an acronym. So,
and it doesn't look good on a billboard. It's hard to put the full name like on the billboard and on the sign. Can you imagine having to say? Can you imagine if we had to say those words, Tetrahydrocannabinol, every single week? I can barely say it there. That's a lot of pressure to say that right. So it becomes the fact that it's much easier. And I love this part on the why so many acronyms here: legal ambiguity, right? That definitely, given the fact that if we made THC federally illegal, well, we wouldn't have all these legal cannabinoids. We wouldn't have CBD. We wouldn't have any of that if THC was illegal. But thanks to the 2014 Farm Bill identifying the 0.3%, and then thanks to the 2018 Farm Bill or Agricultural Improvement Acts, which pushed forward the sale in 2018, allowing states to create their own laws to sell these legal cannabinoids, we have the legal ambiguity of less than 0.3% D9, Delta-9 Tetrahydrocannabinol. And so because that's the only thing that's considered illegal on a federal level, all these other things exist. And so all the other people who deal in industrial hemp, they're super happy of this ambiguity.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. That actually brings up a really fair point.
And then once again, it gets really confusing, right? It gets confusing, as we talked about. For newcomers, it can be hard to do that. So let's break them down a little bit, Dustin. Let's help the people understand what the differences are. We should point out, right, clearly, cannabis makes a little bit of money here. Dustin, did you know?
Does it?
2000.
For the
Well, let's hold
government,
on.
for the IRS.
2023. Well, let's talk legal adult use sale, just sales in general. So we know, according to the people that crunch these numbers, people like New Frontier Data, Cannabis Business Times, in 2019, cannabis was a $16 billion industry, right? That was 4 years ago. In double that time, or in 4 years from then, it's almost doubled to $30 billion. But here's the rip on that. So in 2020, it was like 24 billion. In 2022, all of a sudden it's up to 30 billion. Well, guess what? This is the first time that legal sales as a whole are kind of dipping. Legal sales from 22 to 23 is the smallest incremental increase that the industry has seen since it started, right? They thought 22 was low. We only had about a 6% increase in sales. It looks like, and it's hard to put numbers exact on this. There's a lot of asterisks and gray in the legal cannabis market. But if the numbers project to be true, this will be the first year. And they're saying 30 billion, according to the most recent numbers, which is the exact same as 2022. I think it might be a little less, and they're a little afraid to say it. They round it up, is what I'm saying. I'm making accusations here. So what do you think about that? This is the first year that since Colorado in 2014 and Washington in 2014 creating adult use sales, really, which is when this number is tracked heavily. We have some data prior to 2014, but 14 is really when they began tracking this as an industry. This is the first time that it's become stagnant, that it's going to plateau. What are we thinking?
I I'm not someone who thinks that market share should constantly go up every year indefinitely for the life of the company. I think that when you make some large moves and stuff like that, then it takes some time to see them through. And so I think that one, we still don't have access across the board. And so with that, there's always going to be some growth when access gets easier. And then do I think that it will eventually plateau at some point? Possibly 50 years, 30 years. I feel like it's going to take a lot longer to see the national expansion and what that looks like and play out than what they're predicting right now. So yes, do I believe that in these states that cannabis is legal, it's plateauing a little bit? Yeah, fuck yeah, because the growth was so high during COVID that we should be seeing 2 years worth of plateau or decrease.
But it's not everywhere. Where you're seeing it at is especially in the old head states like Colorado, Washington, Oregon, California. For example, Michigan did its highest numbers ever.
That's tourism
$3 billion.
travel. You used to travel to California or Colorado to smoke weed. Now you get to travel 2 hours to Michigan if you're in Ohio like us and have some of the same benefits. And so is it just that the tourism dollars shifted in some capacity, or the I don't even know,
I think you're dead on. It used to be, in order to get legal cannabis, I mean, you had to go to places and to get it. You had to go out west. Now, as more and more states make it legal, I mean, Michigan at its highest number, Missouri, first year in adult use, over $1 billion, right? By the way, little ugly fact of that, 9% of that is medical. So it's all adult use dollars. So we're in a state in Ohio. Let's put it in perspective. Ohio, year one, is probably going to do pretty well. It's going to be first year sales. It's going to be exciting. But do you predict, let me ask you this, Ohio, in 4 years, do you think Ohio will have year after year growth? And Michigan's been adult use now for 4 years. Do you think in 4 years, Ohio will have its biggest year in cannabis ever? Does it continue to grow and grow and grow and grow? Or do you think Ohio has a big spike and then kind of plateaus like some of these other states, like a Delaware? Not Delaware, but some of the New England type states that have legalized, they hit early, but then that kind of like plateaued to a fairly standard number.
I really wanted to see a map that showcased where the almost like drought spots are in Ohio with access to dispensaries. So we still do have a lot of rural areas that are doing an hour plus travel to get their medicine as it stands. And those are going to have just the same amount of struggle getting the adult use. It's still quite a bit of time. You're still going out of your way to do it. So I don't know, man. I think that first year is always going to be the banger. But that doesn't mean I don't think that it's going to plateau from that point on, that we're only going to see the highest numbers year one. I think Ohio's got a lot more work to do in order to saturate this market in a different way and gain access to some really, most areas within the state. I do think that Ohio is going to inevitably be bigger than Michigan in sales, though.
Ooh, hot take. We need a buzzer like hot take. Dustin Kava, Ohio's going to beat Michigan. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. So we'll see what happens with cannabis. But just as a whole, THC sales above 0.3%, Delta-9 Tetrahydrocannabinol, legal adult use and medicinal cannabis. That's what sold 30 billion. Also, you can see on screen here, if you're watching on video, if you listen on audio, you can check us out on video, Spotify and YouTube. $8 billion up to potentially 12 billion, give or take. CBD, once again, it's really hard to track. And this number, by the way, typically includes your other legal cannabinoids like Delta-8. Those are all very, very hard to track because there's a lot of shadiness sometimes happening behind the scenes. So let's say it's about 8 billion. It's about a third, give or take. I think that's a fair number. So if cannabis sells 30 billion, I think you can add another 9-10 billion of legal cannabinoids and such, and the rise of that. And unfortunately, a lot of the rise of legal cannabinoid plant product is probably not great plant product. You know what I mean? It's not great stuff. So be careful out there if you're buying those CBDs and Delta-8s and whatnot. But what are the differences? What are the differences between them? So let's talk through these, Dustin. As you mentioned at the beginning of the show, there are over 100 different known cannabinoids, right? And so THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, that really steals the show. That's the big boy that gets us high. But there's probably five big ones that I think we should cover through today. I'll start with this. By the way, am I saying this correctly? Like, I am not. I'm someone who talks, I guess, for a living, but still working on how to pronounce certain words. And as we talked about, these get hard to pronounce. Dustin, what is that? Say THC. You can see the word on screen there. It's spelled out for you. Say THC for me, not the letters. Say the scientific pronunciation.
Tetrahydrocannabinol.
I think that's right. Tetrahydrocannabinol. I think that's correct. I always put a D in there sometimes.
But man, you're not wrong with how hard it is to say something. I have to say that I struggled and I ended up finding this really, really, really awesome utility. Let me look for this for a second.
It can be tough on that for that part. All right. Oh, what do we got here?
This guy, this is my new favorite YouTuber. He's actually hasn't really done anything in about 3 years, and he's got a whopping 48 subscribers. So I definitely think we need to give this man a shout out. And
Cannabis and Her Parts 2129 is the at on YouTube. I think there's even an Instagram, Cannabis_her_parts. We'll put some links in the description. Cannabis and Her Parts 2129 on YouTube.
Tetrahydrocannabinol.
Go ahead. Let's let
Tetrahydrocannabinol. Tetrahydrocannabinol.
Tetrahydrocannabinol.
That's how you say it, folks. Tetrahydrocannabinol. Oh, he's got all of them pronounced on screen there. Well, you should put that to the side because we got some of these other ones.
Yeah, we're gonna test our knowledge.
We're gonna test our knowledge here coming up. Hey, that's a good point. Let's see how we pronounce it, and then let's see how they pronounce it. All right. So THC. This is the main active ingredient that people are looking for therapeutic and for the high and the adult use. It typically is going to have a psychoactive effect in your body of some way, shape, or form. It can be euphoric. It could be a lot of different things for a lot of different people. We're not going to break down the science of how it makes you feel, sativas and indicas and all that. But typically, it's going to produce an effect within your body. You're going to feel that effect in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, as THC has grown as a therapeutic industry since 1996 in California, it's used for a variety of different symptoms all across the board for a variety of different people. It is illegal, Dustin, as we know, in all but 2 countries, Uruguay and Canada. Ohio just became the 24th state to legalize THC, to legalize adult use THC sales starting sometime the summer of 2024. 40 states have medicinal. We got 4 territories have medicinal, 2 territories have adult use. And it's typically associated for a lot of pain management in those areas, but clearly consume too much of the wrong, terp profile, too much of the wrong thing. And you may have some anxiety and we may have some paranoia. We've all been there a little bit. And we've all probably had, I know that day I made those cookies, I had a little cognitive impairment on there. THC, that's our big boy, right?
Yeah, that's the big daddy. That's the one everybody loves.
All right. So if we got THC, that's what people are shopping for as a whole. We have our next one here, Dustin, CBD. Tell me about CBD.
This is I think this is the one that's changing the most perspectives on the plant. I think this is the one that is the big daddy gateway right now. To me, I think that this is, we've known about it for a really long time, but I also think this is the therapeutic portion of the plant. This is the one where you really don't have there's none of that high, that you get off of it. But still, I'm not going to say it's not euphoric or it can't change how you're perceiving your current moment. But this is a good one, Cannabidiol.
Is that how we say it? Cannabidiol? Let's turn to Cannabis. Can we go to Cannabis and her parts for confirmation? I don't know if he pronounces them correctly, but he is now my correct pronunciation. So I am also is it Cannabidiol? I think it might be Cannabidiol.
I think you're right. I think
there's an aisle on the American Idol. Let's go.
Cannabidiol. Cannabidiol. Cannabidiol.
Cannabidiol. All right, so cannabidiol. That makes sense. Cannabidiol on that where. So cannabidiol, CBD, it's been legal now since 2014. That's when they kind of brought this kind of number out there that talked about it a little bit, made it a little bit legal in that area.
Dude, this one's made the biggest change in my life, I have to say, or one of them. There's another one that we'll talk about a little bit later that I'm sure will come up. But CBD, I've just seen some of the most amazing transformations in myself, in friends around me, in, I really, this was a big one.
Can I just say that I put all these molecules on the slide when preparing them, but they all look the same to me. I'm sorry. They do. I know people that nerd out on this. They're not, but they're saying, for example, let's look at the cannabidiol right now. A slide on screen. It's on the left-hand side of your screen. You're watching a video. Go over to the, oops, there we go. There you go, Dustin. Go over to this one. That CBG. All right. See that on the left-hand side there, and that CBD. Yeah, there's some slight molecule differentiation there. Dustin, our favorite right now, cannabinoid, and one probably talked about most in the last 2 months since is CBG.
Yeah, baby.
I don't know if I know how to pronounce this. Cannabigerol? No, that can't be right. Cannabigerol?
Cannabigerol.
All right, Cannabis and her parts, you are required here to help us out. I'm going it's got to be a soft G.
I think it's a hard one.
At their monitor, they're screaming, listening to these idiots. We are. That's why we have folks like Cannabis and her parts 2129 to help us out. Let's go to our official pronouncer of the show.
Okay, let's see what they're saying. He's saying
Cannabigerol. Cannabigerol.
Cannabigerol.
Cannabigerol.
Bigerol. It's like it's French. Cannabigerol. What am I doing? That's not even a French accent at all. Cannabigerol. Here's something. So cannabigerol has been known recently. I think it's gained a lot of rise in popularity for the reasons that we love it, Dustin. It seems to have a very energetic, it seems to have a very uplifting effect. It seems to give a tremendous amount of focus and energy without some of the paranoia. And if consumed too much, I got to tell you, I get a little bit of the caffeine shakes. I had like a full joint and I was a little like, woo! Like I was like flaring around the house all day. I was like, woo! And I was like, what is happening? But I wasn't like freaking out my brain. Like, oh my God. I was just like, whoa, I was ready to do anything, man.
I noticed the same effects with me. It is not as bad as a caffeine shake, but I have gotten a little jittery. Like, damn, I'm gonna go make the bed, clean the house, do the dishes, organize the shoes. I'm fucking
Organizing when you're organizing
Like,
shoe level. But look, when you get to the organizing shoe level of your day, you know that's working, right? When you're at the point where you're like, I am doing chores that I never intended to do in the first place, that means the product is working. So CBG, by the way, most abundant typically in the younger version of the plant. Though we are seeing folks like our buddies at Reverb Wellness that are in same with Ross Hott at Hot Hemp. You can check him out on a previous show, really focusing on breeding CBG, in breeding just that specific cannabinoid. So it says on screen here, you know, most abundant young plants, it begins to transform into THC and CBD as the plant matures. But much like CBD, right, in the late 90s, early aughts, when people began to breed genetically, they began to phenohunt for CBD heavy plants, take the best of those and then breed them generation after generation, which eventually just turned into plants that were producing heavy CBD. You're seeing that same thing happening in the CBG industry. Their biggest fear is testing hot. Ross talked about that a lot, and we'll get to THCV here in a second. But the biggest fear is getting a little too much because then all of a sudden you're THC. So the secret in this is to grow it and pull it, I guess, and harvest it before it gets into turning into too much either CBD or THC. But definitely, I think CBG is my opinion, going to be the cannabinoid that takes off in the next 4 or 5 years. I think you're going to see a rise of legal CBG. You might even, I hate to say this, you might even start to see it like almost become like gas station product, right? There's a big part of that, but it seems to be like,
I mean, and it very well might happen sooner than you think if the government goes through with the Delta-8 removal stuff. So there's a lot of talk about kind of
oh, that's true. If you take away all those, the weed scientists, they're smart, man. They're just going to say, okay, well, this isn't cannabis also. Can I get a point real quick? This is a bit of a off tangent. Have you seen the commercials for Mood?
Dude, they are doing some Facebook ads, and I'm like, how the fuck?
Not Facebook ads. They're in the NFL. They're doing commercials during Sunday broadcasts. They're all over YouTube. They're all over my disc golf YouTube. I don't think they're all over up right now, and they're selling this kind of legal THCA stuff, but they are all in on selling it on the internet, shipped to you. In fact, I was at a dispensary doing a thing, and someone came up to me and we were talking, and they said, "Do you have Mood here?" But that's my point.
Yes.
It's getting into the populace. The general public, as much as we love to talk about all these cannabinoids, the general public, as we highlighted at the very beginning of the show, they just want to smoke weed, man. They do. I know there's some nerds out there. I know there's some folks that really geek out on this stuff. Dustin does more than I, and we got other buddies that have been on the show, obviously, that are super smart about these things. I think Alex Sandorf and Dr. Hemant Kumar Bid, like these folks are just breaking it down. But at the end of the day, people are like, oh, I can get weed online. Stuff like Mood, that's going to really cut into these sales. And what they're doing, not quite like our buddies at Bud Love. I'm all over the board with pronunciations today. You know, they're finding ways to sell kind of a legal product, though Bud Love is taking marshmallow leaf and infusing it, though they put some CBG in there. But Mood, I think, could be an indicator of how this industry could move forward that really gets around the state-to-state sales. And Mood might become eventually the second biggest brand after cookies, or the biggest brand, right?
Man, I think that they're going to end up going out of business. I predict bankruptcy in 2.5 years.
For Mood?
Yep.
Man, they're just rebranded something else for that.
I just know that when you spend that much money on national advertising, in addition to, I'm waiting for the celeb endorsements. Once I see celebrity endorsements, I'm just like, there's just too much money down the drain to actually expand properly and to really take care of the company. So
that's a good point.
But at the same point, I was really impressed in the way I watched them skirt certain advertising things or terms of service agreements on some of these large platforms for advertisement. And
they were all in. They're all in. They're like, look, this product's going to get you high. This product's going to make your sex better. I mean, that's what they're selling. They're like, you got the Mood. And she's like, what? And they're like, they go back to the bed. I mean, you got the Mood, and they're literally selling it. Like we have talked about, selling normal people. It's enhancing the mood. Great name, by the way. it's enhancing the mood of whatever mood you're trying to get into. And they are all in on selling it, even not like alcohol. Alcohol is a little scared to be like, hey, you want to get a tipsy and knock some boots? This is like, hey, let's smoke a little. Let's go back in the back room. So shout out to Mood for being all in on that. We'll see how it does. But I do agree with you. These other cannabinoids and trying to sell them legally, heavy advertising is going to be tough because eventually the price is going to drop in your state and you're going to be able to get it fairly inexpensively.
Well, and these, before we go on, the THC, CBD, and CBG, these are three that we have known about for a really long time, is it not? These go back where,
no, these are more common. Like these are the ones we've been talking about CBD since the late 90s. You can watch that great film CBD Nation with Andrew D'Angelo.
I swore that they were writing about it in the 60s at least.
Probably no. The CBG has been talked about. Here's the thing, though. These things have been talked about it for a while. Like we know, like when CBG kind of come around, like we can go all the way back to probably Raphael Mechoulam. That's hard for me to say as well. Back in the 60s, the famous Israeli scientist. We need that guy on Cannabis and her parts. That's a hard one for me to say. Not great at pronouncing. What am I? Back in the 60s was finding out that this cannabinoid, he really is the father of cannabinoids, Mr. THC, as some folks call him. I'd be dope if I ran into him. He's passed away, but Mr. THC. I want to be Mr. THC. But he identified all of these cannabinoids very, very early. But then it's the 1970 Controlled Substance Act, right? This was in the early 60s. Had the CSA not happened, a lot of this research is going to come to the US and then going to expand. Nixon pops in. Nixon gets mad at Timothy Leary trying to bring 2 joints on a plane, says, all right, all this legal weed heads, shuts it all down. And so research stops here. I remember having Dr. Bidd on when he was talking about how he'd be walking down the streets in India and they're like, cannabis is growing. Oh, yeah, well, it's a big deal. But in America, it's like the devil, right? And so it becomes that thing where we missed out on a lot of potential research on what CBD, what CBG, and what our next buddy here, CBN, could be doing for you as a human being, which they've known about for 70 years now in Israel, right? So CBN, so it's got to be cannabinol. I get cannabinol. I'm pretty confident on that one. You can bring up Cannabis and her parts, but cannabinol, I'm pretty confident on that. So let's talk CBN while Dustin brings up the pronunciation. Now you're looking at probably a mild effect. I think CBG has a slight effect in CBN does as well. How's he say it?
Cannabinol.
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 Cannabinol. Right? Cannabinol. So it's the BI. It's the it should be BEE. Cannabinol. So cannabinol, CBN, is a natural sedative, right? So this is what happens when you cut and harvest the plant. As soon as you harvest it, all that THC and CBD begins to degrade into CBN, right? So if you have a plant, and I would say CBN is what sometimes makes an indica, right? I know there's some science there, but the more it cures, the more CBN it's going to get. Obviously, terpenes, the more myrcene it has, maybe the more sedative it is. But this has a sedative effect. You're seeing it on par right now. People are using it in replace of melatonin and other natural sleep additives.
Well, did you ever find, a small jar of fucking cannabis that you just put up in the top of your closet and didn't find for 2 years or a year and a half? And when you finally do, you're like, I'm smoking this shit.
Everyone's
right now.
smoking it. Yes. Right. The answer is yes and yes and yes.
And do you ever remember how tired and stuff you were afterwards? It just felt very like downing, and a lot of that is I wonder how much of that THC is degraded to CBN, which gives a lot of that tired.
That's a great question. You know what? I didn't think about it or put those together, but you're probably correct on that regard. It's probably just because it is overly cured. So CBN, once again, be careful with CBN. I think that's a nice little warning on the bottom. It can make you sleepy. And so if you're on other medicines that have natural sedative effects, you don't want your body to become too sedated, right? Too, Ramon's overly sedated for that. So I was trying to work that joke in there. CBN, I think CBN is going to, along with CBG, as things like our next cannabinoids on screen here, Delta-8, is things like Delta-8 and all these other ones get pushed out, I think you're going to see the rise of the CBN to sleep and the CBG to get up, right? In that form, maybe even so much where you start to get people putting CBN, CBG like melatonin into pill bottles and things like that, putting them into capsules, right? And then so take it like I go to the doctor and they're having trouble sleeping. They don't want to give you like Ambien and stuff. The first line of medicine they give you is melatonin.
Yeah,
That's what they say. Take some melatonin. I go to the store. I can buy melatonin. You're going to tell me soon that you're not going to be able to go to the store and buy CBN in a capsule, and it's another natural herb, which is supposed to have a sedative effect.
Dude, I just read this crazy article from like a UPS guy. He had like wrote basically this news source to be like, something is going on with melatonin at all these daycares. I am delivering so much melatonin to daycare facilities in my state that I don't even know what to say. Are all of these kids being drugged up on melatonin? You know, like for nap time? Yeah. So, and I wonder, is the CBN going to be the new melatonin in daycares, or like, you know, is it less habit forming? Is it beneficial to the body in other ways? I think
at this point, that's what people believe, but they probably shouldn't be delivering it by crates to the daycare center. Getting someone in trouble. All right. Speaking of getting in trouble, this cannabinoid, this is getting some folks all riled up. It's a combination between pissing off the legal THC sellers, right? Let's be real. They're the ones who are also pushing for this bill because the more D8 you buy at your smoke shop, the less legal THC you're buying at your dispensary. So Delta-8 has really seen the rise. During COVID, it became huge and has taken off and created a lot of legal headaches for certain people. So Delta-8 Tetrahydrocannabinol, similar to THC, obviously. Some people say it has a less intense high. I think it has a shorter high. It definitely has a psychoactive effect. I don't know if I love it, though, sometimes, and how I feel after it. It's a very gray area, right? So it's this slightly similar cannabinoid to D9. It's really taking the plant and manipulating it. But then a lot of times they take this and they just spray it with other oils and other things to give it more effect to it. It says, you know, people get nervous about the legitimacy and the legality and the health risk, but I think the health risk is not the plant. It's the stuff being sprayed onto the plant that is the health risk. The cannabinoid of Delta-8, the slightly different genetic makeup compared to D9, is not unhealthier or healthier compared to D9. It's the shit put on it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like, again, you still need to, this extraction doesn't just happen on the plant, you know, like you breaking this down, you're concentrating certain forms of it, separating stuff from the CBD, converting it into Delta-8, and then again, reapplying it to plant matter, you know, and that's the spray is like, what can we get that allows this crystallized thing to sit on the plant matter again, almost as if it is, you know, one. And I don't know, man. I've gotten just as stoned off of it as say anything else. And
you find the effects to be shorter? Like
I do. Yes, I do. And maybe a tiny bit less mild in certain dosages, but it's gotten to that point where I'm like, holy shit, I don't really know how I feel about it right now. You know, like I'm on the fence because I've had such experiences where it just something didn't seem right. But then you go to a reputable provider or vendor like our good boys like Ross Hott and, you know,
Organic Botanic, you know,
yes.
Mason and Christian, Alex Huska with Organic Plus brands and Plant Puff, obviously Reaver Wellness, Chagrin Valley Hemp, like Hot Hemp. These are all a lot of Ohio companies. So we're buying local Ohio growers, like all these companies we name, people
have a
growing it here.
They're
processing it here. We know the human beings that are doing it. And so, you know, when you know the folks, when you know Alex is doing it and his crew and, you know, Josh and Leo at Reaver Wellness, like, you know, they're doing it themselves, like personally. So you have a trust and faith. But I agree with you. I've been consuming less and less unless it's from a regular area. But in general, I don't know if I love the way I feel on it. But it definitely sells to the kids, as they say, right? It definitely is big. It's available in a lot of, this is the product that's getting folks in trouble. This is the stuff that people are sneaking into gas stations and they're not age gating. right?
Yeah,
Even at a
that's
smoke
the biggest
shop,
thing is they're not educating.
it's not the plant, it's the people selling it. Like alcohol is sold and supposed to be ID checked and stuff like that. And so you need to make these products ID checked. Like I still get at this gas station by me, they put a new policy in, they want to scan my ID every time we buy alcohol. I'm fine with that. I'm 50 years old, but I got it. I'm cool. It's not going to bother me. It's their job. But the legal products that make you speed, no one ever asked for my ID for that. I get ID'd for children's cough syrup at Acme, but I won't get ID'd for, Smash and Bash Bros, the little capsule you can buy at the register. So be careful with your D8, folks. It is becoming very popular these days. So that's kind of the last of the big boys, Dustin. We have THC, we have CBD, we have CBN, we have CBG, and we have Delta-8. But there are some other cannabinoids that have gained some popularity in the last few years. I need you to bring up Cannabis in her parts because I don't think I can pronounce any of these. So see if they have any of these on screen. I'll read through them, Dustin. If you find pronunciations, help me out. So let's start with CBC. A lot of these are going to be similar. They're just all these different cannabinoids. We have THCV, CBGVA, CBDA, CBCP, CBL, CBE. Trying to get all these different letters. Let's just bring up some of his stuff. Let's just bring them up.
Okay.
And so a lot of these different cannabinoids are going to have a lot of different therapeutic effects into that.
Cannabichrominone.
Ooh, I like that. He's a little flair. Cannabichrominone. You know what that probably does? It probably has anti-inflammatory effects and such. So
Cannabis cyclol.
So I there's something to be said here, which is, I guess I really want to talk about, oh my gosh, this former parts playing again in my ear. So I guess there's a part of me that wants to discuss some of the things that aren't discussed in the usage cases of some of this. Like, have you ever looked up, I don't know, like temperatures that a lot of this stuff vapes off at and stuff like that? Or like, what is the boiling point of the oil essentially?
Minor research, not as much as some. Once again, I know a little bit, but I don't know as much of a detail. But I'm assuming that, because this is what we learned when we did our concentrates episode, is you adjust the temperature a little higher, a little lower, right? You adjust something a little bit this way or that way. And so it's going to give you probably a different set of flavors, a different set of cannabinoids just based off the temperature that you're consuming it, let alone a lot of these are in the harvesting and growing and genetic process, right? Some of your plant strains are just more genetically for more CBDA than they have CBL. These are all just working together like inside your body to help you out, but they're starting to highlight some particular cannabinoids for certain medicines in that. But am I kind of on track? Like just the temperature affects the effect.
I mean, and I think a lot of people, I wonder how many times outside of these edibles or these capsules or these vapes, I really wonder how much we're really losing with our combustion process. A lot of this stuff can vape off at 200, like I said, you see 220 degrees, half of what the combustion rate is. And so, by the time that flame is getting to that material and lighting it on fire, by the time you ever inhale it, you've already lost a ton of what is possible in here. So, and I wonder at what point are we going to start seeing the detriment to combustion to getting some of these? I wonder if vaping is going to take back a hold with a lot of the people who care about these individual cannabinoids. And if someone is taking, like I said, like I have my CBG flower, I notice the rushing effects when I vape it more than when I smoke a joint of it. And to me, that I wonder what other are these terpenes? What other portion of that am I also getting at that 220 to 270 range where, what other entourage effect am I getting that people aren't talking about?
Well, I think the question comes back to then is how many people care, right? The entourage effect is a real thing, right? We know that the various cannabinoids working together, and we'll highlight here real quick before we end flavonoids and terpenes. We'll do a full episode on those soon. Be sure to check out our concentrate and tourism episodes on educational versions of Because Cannabis podcast. The entourage effect is a real thing. Right. And so it matters if you combust it with a flame versus vaporization versus infused into a powder versus all these things affect how it enters your body. It also, the cannabinoid profile, the terpene profile, like all those things are going to have different effects on your body when combined together. And we know this. The problem is, how do we get them to work together? And this is probably the biggest issue. Do people give a shit? I'm being honest. You just said right there, right? Like, how people are worried about if they're combusting versus vaping. I think vaping is never going to be bigger than combusting because it requires a separate device, right? Combusting already requires a device. You got to have a bowl, you got to have a lighter, you got to have two things to consume flower. You got to have a container to put it in, whether it's a piece of paper or a cone or a bowl or a 8-foot Billy Bong Thornton dab rig. You got to have something to put it in, and you got to have some way to light it. Now, convenience wise says, hey, here's this vaporization, but there's two categories which have seen dramatic rise. The only two categories that are really rising steadily while other categories are falling, Dustin, are all-in-one vapes and pre-rolls. What do both of those tell you? It's not about the end result cannabinoid flavor profile. It's about cheap, quick, and convenient, right? I cannot stress this enough. Those two categories, especially pre-rolls, infused pre-rolls, even infused pre-rolls is 7% of legal sales right now. 15% is pre-made cones and in rising. Hundreds of percentile increase every year because people want cheap, convenient, and quick. So we can talk about how it's amazing that you can have an orchestra-like effect within your body where THC is the conductor and all these other cannabinoids are serving as the wind and the brass and the drums, and then making it into this amazing ensemble. I like ensemble effect over entourage effect, by the way. Let's put it on entourage or ensemble effect. Which one are we going with?
Oh, God. I think...
Everyone says entourage, but
I know. I think it sounds cooler. Ensemble, I picture like a bunch of like, I don't know, the maestro and the orchestra in the background going. Dun, 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 dun,
Well,
dun.
maybe I'm an artsy fella for that. And here's what's interesting, Dustin. What's on screen right now? Something you talked about, and maybe it's true. This bottom line here: milder psychoactive effects. Right when you start to strip out some of the other cannabinoids and you're mainlining pure THC, bro, calm down. That's a little much. So these other benefits, these medicinal benefits, they need all these different cannabinoids and they need all these different terpenes. So if you're stripping it all out just to get yourself crazy THC, I don't know if that's the way to go. That's why I love the people making concentrates who will take it out and put THC, but then maybe put the sauce back in of the terpene. So we've been talking this whole episode, about different cannabinoids, our THC, our CBD, our CBG, our CBN, and our Delta-8, our big ones. We highlighted a bunch of other smaller cannabinoids that you can go through. Be sure to check out Cannabis and Her Parts for those proper pronunciations. And I think we should do a full episode, Dustin, on different terpenes and flavonoids because there really is a lot more to say about them. But just in closing, let's just talk real quick about terpenes and kind of, where they sit. It's what terpenes give it that smell, right? It give it that smell, but it also has a lot of abilities to give it some different kind of effects within the body.
When I owned the shop, there was for a while there a big craze on, people asking for concentrated terpenes to kind of do what they will with it. And there were some real simple ways to vape really, really small amounts of these terpenes. And I'm not going to lie, man, I noticed a massive difference in mood, a massive, thinking about like the limonene and, I remember when I vaped that pure, just terpene again in very, very, very
pure
small amounts.
limonene.
Yeah, well, there used to be something. It's not something. It was a simple way. We used something called a vapor straw, and the idea was that you would slightly tip the end of it into the terpene, so that only like a tiniest dot of it would get on the piece of glass, and then you suck in very, very fast. No heat, no anything, but that air movement aerosolizes the terpene, or and then allows you to kind of breathe it in real simply and without too much. And I have to say, like, it was holy shit moments where it did that. That's how that's when I started looking at terpenes in my product more seriously, or thinking about them in a different way, tracking my regimen with some of these terpenes and this entourage effect that's caused from them.
It is. Well, let's talk real quick. These are on screen here, the 6 kind of big boys when it comes to, we shouldn't gender these, the 6 big folks when it comes to terpenes. We should actually feminize them. That's the whole plan of the 6 big gals when it comes to terpenes flavor profile. Myrcene. Myrcene's probably the most commonly found terpene in all of cannabis. You know, sometimes up to the majority of the terpenes profile. It's earthy, it's musky, a more sedative effect, right? There are some people who will say, just look at your strain profile. The more myrcene it has, the more indica leaning it's going to be. I think that's pretty much straight science there. Heavy myrcene, heavy, probably sedative effects on there. On the flip side of that is the carefulline, right? And on the carefulline, this is a spicy, peppery, clovey kind of upper, right? It's a bit of an upper thing. So when you have this, it's both alpha and beta. Same with pinene. They have both an alpha and beta version. It's a very genetic small makeup. They both have similar effects, but carefulline and pinene are both, along with limonene, are typically considered upper kind of area, kind of upper terpenes, is where like a linalool, a humulene, maybe a little bit more downers on there. You know, you have those 6 big ones. Once again, I think there, if you go look as a whole, like there's a lot of different terpenes, and you can see here on screen, we've highlighted some of the strains that are heavily in these terpenes. So you're like, all right, I got a Jack Herrera or an AK-47, which tend to be more sativa leaning strains. Got a lot of alpha and beta pinene inside of there, right? Something like a super silver haze, a lot of carefulline. That's going to be an upper. Where you go into the myrcene, now you have some cushes. Cushes tend to be considerably more indicas, I think, as a whole. Once again, science really in strain lineage really confuses this sometimes. But I would say stop looking at the name of a strain. When you go to shop and it says headband on there, and headband is, once again, I think, considered more of a sativa upper kind of a heady high with the name intended. But if it's pushing a different set of terp profile, it's going to have that effect, right? Have you gotten to that point where you just look past strain names and you just look at terp profiles now?
Yeah, I do. I think
it's the way to go, right?
Well, and you know what? And I've been to a couple states that did not prioritize testing for terpenes and putting it on the product. And I remember in Ohio, originally, when everything first started out, that was also a rarity. There wasn't necessarily a full terpene test or the statement of the terpenes on the jar. Now there is. It is becoming more the norm for the consumer to think in this way. And I also want to bring a point that these terpenes are also found in everyday fruits and vegetables and plants that are growing all around.
Yeah,
this isn't a cannabis thing. And so I think that's an important notion to mention too.
Well, yeah, because when you think about some of these other, like lavender as a whole, right, which is a linalool kind of terpene, lavender is known to be anti-anxiety. I was using some of that in my essential oil diffuser, like putting a ton of these different oils to produce a calming effect in my brain. So it would make sense that lavender is a linalool, kind of ties together in that area. So you have your terpenes, and then you have this one other piece, which really is becoming, I feel like, the buzzword. But once again, these are only buzzwords of people who are digging this stuff in and out the industry. You talk to everyday patients, you mentioned terpenes and flavonoids, they are glassy-eyed, and it's not the weed. They just really aren't as worried about it. So if terpenes produce the smell, flavonoids produce the flavor, right? And so once again, a different metabolite within the plant. These also allow, by the way, for some coloration into there. Into what you're looking at. So, you know, you have some kind of more common flavonoids. I think these are well below people's pronunciation levels. People are starting to know your terpenes. I've never said one person walk up to me and be like, hey man, what's your quercetin level? I don't know if I said that right. I don't know if even Cannabis Center Parts has that one there.
I'm going to check right now. We got
do they have any flavonoids on there
no, I think
for that area?
Terpenes.
So like no one is this. By the way, look at canflavin, Avin B, right? It is a unique flavonoid found only in cannabis in that regard. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But there's a ton of different flavonoids in what they kind of do. Same thing with the terpenes. Now you're looking into finding different plant strains that have terpene profiles, that have flavonoid profiles, that are working towards whatever that ailment is that you are working towards, right? That's what we're trying to do. So it's a lot, Dustin. I mean, even just what we covered, and I feel like what we just talked about throughout this whole, area has been pretty basic information as far as when it comes to cannabis. But as a whole, I don't know. Do you think people at the end of the day, do you think they really, really are going to start digging into this? Or as we go forward, do you think it's just going to be the THC percentage?
Man, not everybody's the same. So I do think that there's going to be the boutique market that really specializes in some of this, and they will have customers who seek them out because of it. I think that if I was to try to cast the broadest net on an industry or on a user within the country, I don't think I'm going to go this deep or this involved. But I do think that there will always be a boutique reason to specialize in this or to explore these some more.
It'll be interesting to see how the industry evolves. We'll find out together. Hopefully you'll find out with us on the Because Cannabis podcast. Thank you for watching this episode, by the way. We really appreciate it. A third part, I guess, in our educational series here. We'll have to do a terpene and flavonoid specific show. I think there's a lot of information to be got there. So if you haven't already, check out our concentrate episode. Check out our tourism episode. There's some great information on some of this stuff. Alex.
Well, I wouldn't call it great. But
no, there's some folks behind that we've had on the show that have had some quality.
They are great. Our guests are great.
Dig through the past interviews to find a lot of folks talking about this stuff through and through that. We like to talk about cannabis every single week, every Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube, every Thursday on Spotify with video, and anywhere that you listen to audio podcasts. You can check us out socially at MeetWM. Dustin, love it. Going a great show. Do you feel smarter now? I feel a little more educated? Feel ready?
I feel like I learned some things, which is
I
good.
feel like I learned some things too. We hope you learned some stuff. Be sure to give us a subscribe or a follow so you can learn next week. Take care, everybody.
Take care, guys.